discussion. This is just going to be an introductory conversation on a much larger topic. You could spend a whole quarter on this subject. And if it's been a while since you've spent a whole quarter on this subject, I would strongly consider it. And now, before we get started, I want to make sure that it is clearly understood. I am not standing up here as some expert. I am not standing up here as some expert on the subject who's got it all figured out, and I'm out there every day just doing this successfully, and the building at Joliet is just busting at the seams because of my efforts. I need this just as much as any other Christian. So I'm standing up here just as the facilitator of the conversation, not the teacher, not the expert, because we all need to be doing this more. Right? I've never met the Christian that said, yeah, I'm praying about as much as I think I need to. I've never met the Christian that said, yeah, I'm reading my Bible about as much as I think I need to. And I've never met the Christian that says, yeah, I'm evangelizing as much as I need to be. I've never met the Christian that has said those three things. And so I certainly fall into that category as well. But we're going to have hopefully a very honest and open but respectful conversation about this great responsibility this morning. So I just kind of want to get all that out of the way. Before we do that, though, Bob, if you would lead our minds in a word of prayer.
Father, we're grateful for the opportunity that we have to come together this morning to learn more of thy word, and more of the interaction that we must have with the word so that Christian faith. We pray, Heavenly Father, for the facilitator of this class, that he can touch our hearts, that we can show others the great love that you have for us, aware of the destiny that you have without Christ. We pray for those that are unable to be with us, comfort them, strengthen them, that they might join with us once again. This is our prayer that we offer in Christ's name.
Amen. So just look up, when is class over?
45.
45, and is there like a 5-minute warning bell?
Yes.
A 2-minute warning bell. So yeah, that's what I need to know. Got to time myself. All right, so this morning I want us to see if we can work through 4 questions. We'll see what we can do. But, all right, well, we'll just get started. Here's the first one. Well, this is the title we're talking about. What are we to do? And there's 2 different ways that we can look at this. You know, there's just the simple, functional, what are we supposed to do as Christians? But then there's another way that we can look at this, and that is when we realize something bad has happened, and I think back to the people of Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost when they looked at each other and said, "Men and brethren, what are we to do?" And that was a question that was asked in desperation. And so I think that when it comes to evangelism, this same question can be looked at both ways. What are we to do? And, oh man, what are we to do now? So I think that it's something that can be done both ways. But here's what I want us to talk about first. Very simple question. Why should I be concerned about reaching lost people? That's the question. Yes, sir.
Well, Jesus was. He definitely was. That was his mission to come here to save us.
Yeah, Luke 19:10. The Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. That was what Jesus was interested in. And so that's part of the answer. But that's what Jesus was interested in. But why does that matter to me?
There's 2 answers to this that should help us. One is the fact that there's a desperation involved. If we say we have compassion of any kind, then we ought to realize the situation is such that the house is burning down and people are asleep inside.
Yeah, we love, there's people that we love, right? And they're lost. I mean, there's certainly to look at it that way. There's people that I know there's people that I love, and they're lost. So that is absolutely a part of it. Yes?
Should expand beyond that. I mean, you help anybody.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you feel personally.
That combines both answers, right? There's people that I love that are lost, and then Jesus loved everybody, and so he died for every single person, regardless of who they were. If they were a human being, Jesus died for them. Why else? Why else? And I'm not necessarily looking for any particular answer. I'm just like, how many different ways can we answer this question? Steve?
We sang a hymn last night that touches on the issue of gratitude. If the name of the Savior is precious to you, if his care has been constant and tender, if the light of his presence has brightened your way, do I not have gratitude for what the Lord has done for me, or does that not fill me with such joy that I want to share it with other people, aside from the command to do it, aside from the necessity of lost people? There ought to be something in me that motivates me because of what Christ has done for me.
Absolutely. I didn't care about lost people because I was lost once. I'm a debtor. And I was lost. And Jesus saved me. Right? So yeah, and you mentioned something, and I don't mean to go, but you've said something that nobody else has said something yet, and that's, it's commanded. Jesus did it, and that's great. But logically, just because Jesus does, that is not necessarily the answer. But unless the answer is Jesus did it, and I'm supposed to be like Jesus, I can point to a lot of things that people do. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm trying to emulate them. To say Jesus did it, maybe it is a necessary inference that, well, yeah, Jesus did it. So let's follow this up. Continue the thought. Jesus did it. So that means I need to do it as well. If Jesus is my example, and I'm going to say, I'm going to follow Jesus in all things. Right? And I know there's a lot of great hands, and so I'm sorry if I'm going to get them in the wrong order. But yes, sir.
So the other part of it is that Scripture constantly uses the analogy of warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Our way of life. We are here to liberate the world from the clutches of Satan, and we do that by freeing people from his grasp.
Absolutely.
Like that's talking about commandments. Paul quotes one of the servant songs in Acts chapter 13, verse 47, but what he does is he says that's our mission. It's not just his mission, it's our mission as well. We are here to take up the banner that Jesus gave us. Isaiah 59 is a great chapter about understanding this. And you pair that with Ephesians chapter 6. The armor the armor of God is the armor that Jesus wore when he came to free the world from sin. That's what Isaiah 59 is all about. Paul takes that and runs with it. Ephesians 6 has its roots in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul is saying now, just like Jonathan gave his armor to David, Jesus is giving his armor to you, so you wear that armor that he wore now. And if we have an army of people that look like Jesus, that can be a very powerful thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, warfare. Soldiers of Christ arise. But we like that. We get into that, right? Oh yeah, battle. But who's the enemy? It's not the lost. It is not the lost that is the enemy. Those are the people we're trying to rescue. We're storming the barriers, we're storming the castle of Satan to rescue people that he has captured. We're not there to fight against them. So, while this world is not heaven, while this world will never be heaven, does seeking the lost have a positive impact on the world and on culture? Of course it will. Yes, sir.
The flip side of that is understanding, reminding ourselves of God's wrath. If we really understand God's wrath, and then we get to the point where we say, well, I don't want to be on the receiving end of that. And it also speaks to our righteousness, doing right toward God, doing right toward others. We shouldn't want anybody else to be in the path of God's wrath.
Absolutely.
I think that those kinds of things will motivate us in a more positive way. And I'm sure you'll probably get to this at some point, focusing more on throwing out a net to save somebody as opposed to coming with a condemning attitude.
Absolutely. I've been hesitant about whether or not I was gonna say this. I've talked to some people about this, and I've been in the Midwest for about 20 years. Right? I am not native of the Midwest. I'm a Southern boy at heart. Georgia will always be home. But I've been in the Midwest for 20 years. I've got family associates, so I feel I can speak to the history of this area. When we're going to talk about evangelism, it's going to force us to do a lot of hard and difficult self-examination. What have I done? What have we done? What have we always done? This is just the way that it's always been done in this area. And it's going to have to force us to really, really think about some things. And I think it's possible that there, for a while, there was maybe this attitude where there were so many amazingly strong, brave stances that were taken for the truth in this area. I have so many people, I respect them so greatly for the difficult, strong stance for the truth that they took over the years. But sometimes it could come across as if the stance for the truth is what all of the energy went into, and not making sure that other people got to get into the kingdom as well. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? Stance for the truth, absolutely. There has not been any balking of the truth. There's not been any compromise of the truth for generations in this area, and that is fantastic. Man, there's so many preachers that have written things over the years, like, I want to know what so-and-so says on this, because I trust them scripturally about their attitudes and their understandings. But the energy to then go out and rescue and bring people in, I'm not sure if as much energy and passion has gone into that over the years. And generationally speaking, it's made an impact. See that love and respect. But I wonder if there's been more of a circling of the wagons than there is a rescuing. Yes, sir, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say that in addition to being community, it is more like Jesus, or God. We are his tools. We are the army that he's built.
Absolutely.
He is the one that we follow, but he uses us to take in and conquer Satan, to bring in the lost, and that's our responsibility. And we're given the chance by the talents that each one of us is given. And your evangelists, like yourself, Brother Wilkin, are there to help push us on that, guide us on that. Because we are God's army. And we're only the soldiers, but we use the guidance of those to help us deliver and finalize the mission.
Steve and I are in an interesting occupation in which our main goal is to make ourselves obsolete. I think about Paul's words to Timothy a lot. One of our big jobs is to equip the saints. I shouldn't freak out if I wake up Sunday morning and I'm sick. I shouldn't worry. Somebody has called me and they really want a Bible study, but there's this other thing. I can't make that. Who else is going to be able to go talk to this person about Jesus that's contacted me? As we've said Friday night, I said it last night, I'll kind of mention this morning. Of all of the ways God could have chosen to make new disciples, He chose us. And it's crazy to question God's wisdom. Really, You chose me to make more disciples? But yeah, brother's absolutely right. Yes, ma'am.
So there's an issue of credibility, which you have none with strangers. And you can talk all day long to them for hours a day, but you just had someone come to Jesus as your teacher, and you immediately took it out and walk past. But to use Mr. Oz analogies, that's stop looking past your own yard work. Are you reaching all the people that God has put you in the lives of right now today?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are you talking to the people that it's the hardest to talk to because it's going to get squishy and you might lose them as a friend, blah, blah, blah. But have you made that step?
I want to come back to that. I want to come back to that in a little while. But she said something. It's about you talking, not me talking. Yes, sir.
I go back to Daniel. Daniel did everything, but he stayed positive, told God, and never said, no, don't do it. But then they realized, okay, God is the
Yes.
person we want to talk to.
Absolutely. Daniel is the one that did. He's such a wonderful example of, regardless of what the culture looks around behind me, I'm going to stay faithful to God. Absolutely. Wonderful. There was another hand. Yes, sir. And then Steve.
Yeah, a picture I want to see, because once brought up the adage, at the day of judgment, when we're being judged, how will we answer the question if God asks us, what have you done with the time that I've given you?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't name something, what are you going to use an excuse?
Yeah. Steve?
I'm wondering if maybe we should nuance the question
Yeah.
of who's the enemy. I'm still kind of pumping on that. Because
Yeah.
the Bible, Jesus himself uses the world. We say the enemy is the world, the flesh, and the devil. Okay,
Right.
well, I can buy that. But the world is used in a couple of pretty diametrically opposite ways. God so loved the world,
Yeah, great
in the
point.
sense that we're talking about, that everybody's a candidate and needs the gospel. But do not love the world. Because the people that are in the world sometimes coalesce around ideas and causes that make them enemies of God. Paul says in Romans 5, we are at enmity with God. Paul talks about the Philippians, people who have become enemies of the gospel. And he's talking about Christians, some of them there. So maybe we need to nuance, who's the enemy opposed to the gospel, probably not going to listen to the gospel, actively engaged in warfare against God, and maybe use a little bit of the wisdom you talked about last night to kind of triage who are people who are, they're not committed,
Yeah.
and they need to hear the gospel.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
No,
clarifies
that's
it.
certainly a part of the conversation. No doubt about it. I mean, if there's one verse that non-Christians love to quote, it's probably from Matthew 7, judge not lest you be judged. But that's also within the same context, within verses of that verse, Jesus says not to toss your pearls before swine. How do you do that without judging? It is impossible to go through life without judging. However, the world collectively, it's pretty evil and dark, and Satan's got it. Individuals in the world are lost. Right? I said this in my sermon before. Jesus doesn't say, let your picketing and your rioting be seen before others. I'm not telling you this is the season for politics. I'm not telling you that cannot be something that you are interested in. That's fine, absolutely. But how we change the world is by one-on-one interactions. I save my neighbor who's living next to me. I'm not going to change the world by going to Washington and picketing somewhere. I'm going to change the world by saving the neighbor that lives next to me. Yes, sir.
To Steve's point, not only should, if we're talking about evangelism, we're also going to have to talk about our own personal tools. So whether you look at examples of Peter having the wrong idea what the fight was about, and how to execute that, if you look at examples of the demon-possessed man and what he was told to do by Jesus, which obviously would have been effective if we'd have kept, if Mark would have kept going with that story, or the woman at the well in John chapter 4, the simple thing, go tell your friends or those you go, what the Lord has done for you. And the simple fact that we do live in a world where people have chosen to be enemies of God, and even some of those people are ignorant of their own ways, and how their ways are opposed to God. So understanding what the battle armor is supposed to be in Ephesians 6, or what the fight is really about, or even you mentioned in Matthew 7, judgment, the difference between discernment, which is wisdom, and condemnation, just declaring somebody, oh, you're not even worth my talking to. With Jesus, God with us, the Father himself sees them and says, go help these people.
Go help these people.
And so I think we have to get into, to your point earlier, introspection and making sure that we have all of the elements that the Lord has blessed us through his word, through all of those people, preachers, teachers, elders, who are supposed to help bring all of us to maturity to be able to do this kind of work.
Okay, last comment, and we gotta move on.
Yeah, I think you touched on this the other night, like there's an othering that happens in our mind, we kind of separate ourselves from people, but to the point that you or someone else just made, like having those interpersonal interactions is the most effective. And that even happens, we can see it in a secular sense. I'm in a master's program for political science, and partisanship and polarization is a research area that people are loving right now. And they found in one study that people that have one extreme view, if they canvass and try to interact with somebody and get them to change their vote, the most effective thing is to knock on their door and have a conversation. So it works in the secular world, and of course works in the spiritual world, because that's how God set us up to have relationships with one another that mirror ours, hopefully it is.
There are so many good programs and books and things out there about how churches can be more evangelistic, and they are worth studying and they are great. But nothing beats you saying to somebody that you know, hey, would you like to come to Bible class with me? Hey, would you like to come and worship with me? Nothing beats that. I'm not saying go study or look at all these other things, but whether you know it or not, you know somebody that would say yes if you invited them. I guarantee right now in your life, you know somebody who would say yes if you invited them. Nothing beats it. I know we can keep talking about this, but I'm sorry, I want to move on. You guys have got most of the things on my list. Why should I be concerned about reaching lost people? I just want to throw out a few others out here. And this is kind of tied along the line. People are confused, and they need guidance. Right? Some people want to find the truth. They don't know where to start. That's where we come in. Also, does teaching somebody else the gospel do something for your own faith? Absolutely. It affirms and confirms your faith. And I wonder if sometimes we're not finding the joy God wants for us because we're not doing the work he designed us to do. We think joy is going to be found in other places. And also, this is a huge one, I want to be a good example for my kids. Before Moses left this earth, one of the biggest things he talked about to the children of Israel was talk to your kids about this. when you lie down, when you wake up. If the church is going to continue after I'm gone, it's going to have to, should the Lord allow the earth to continue to spin after I'm gone, it is going to be up to my children to make more disciples. So if I'm not doing it, I can't expect them to pick it up. So I want to be an example for my kids. And I think it's just kind of the nature of the gospel. What does gospel mean? What does gospel mean? What do you do with good news? You spread it. Are there any unproud grandparents? Does such a thing even exist? You guys start competing with each other. Oh, you only got 5 grandkids, huh? Well, good news. The gospel. It's just in the name. And if we don't do it, who will? That's the last one on my list. If we don't do it, who will? All right, so here's the next question. This is where we get into the real. Do you think this work is being neglected? And so here's the bigger question. Why? Again, I'm not standing up here as the expert accusing. I just can't sit there and yell at myself at the same time. Why is this work being neglected? Yes, sir.
2 words I can think of that I hear from everybody, including myself. I'm busy.
Oof. Man, I have really come to appreciate the statement, if Satan can't make you bad, he's going to make you busy. And I really think, and again, raising my hand as somebody who struggles with this, we are so busy that the work of the Lord is suffering because of that. I truly believe that. If you're like me, I got a house full of teenagers. Every night of the week, we've got something on the calendar, and goodness, oh wait, there's nothing on the calendar tonight. Let's stay home and do nothing. Yeah, we're super busy. Yes, sir.
I think the key word is to maybe neglect.
Neglect, yeah, sure.
Because we can find time to do things if we really want to do it. I mean, if somebody wants to go to a high school football game on a Friday night, they're gonna make time,
Sure.
get everything going ahead of time, get the food ready, get the wife going, get everything. When we put that much effort into saying, hey, I've got in a couple of hours, I bet this new person who's just coming by our church.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask some questions. Can I find 2 or 3 hours of my time to help them? Because if I can't, how can I ever ask God to find time to help me when I'm down and out?
Absolutely. The neglect. Yeah, that word was chosen on purpose. Right? Yes, sir. Here and then over.
Real quick, 2 of them. One is fear.
First one on my list.
Which can be easily.
And there's subsets of fear.
Exactly. The other one, though, and this might even fit in a subset, I would like to say we kind of have a Naaman complex. Many brethren in my lifetime, when the subject of evangelism comes up, they think it has to be this elaborate, complex, program-related thing to do, as opposed to, as I mentioned earlier, starting with the simple thing of telling others what great things the Lord has done for you. And, the good news can start at home, and the good news can start within us toward other people. So even if it is a stranger, there are ways that I wasn't born a big mouth guy. I was actually born a really shy guy. And throughout the years, I know, it's like,
People seem shocked by that for some reason. I don't know.
but you can start a conversation with anyone about anything. And if I am being the person I'm supposed to be, it should naturally be about God. It should be God focused. Now, if they don't want to hear that, they can walk away. If they don't know me, they'll probably not think much of it. But if they care, like the people that I would work with, who after a while they went from "you're weird," "oh, you're a fanatic," to "hey, I'm going through this tough time in my life right now. Can you pray for me?" To, if they won't come here, I can take it to them. Hey, guess what? I'm preaching blah 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 blah. hey, here's this website you can actually listen to. And there was one woman that I did that to, a coworker, and she said, I almost thought you were preaching at me. I almost didn't want to say anything, but I actually watched it. But the fact is, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. And so I think, we get into this thing where we think it has to be this super complex thing, and it's not. It's just, if we are who Jesus says we're supposed to be, I'm just being that.
Just being that. There's ways that strangers can know who you are that feels genuine. Lots of great hands, but I think there was a hand over here first, right? And then here, and then over to Peter.
Okay, so to your point about people thinking it has to be some big, elaborate, monstrosity of a program with predetermined lessons that you have to walk people through before they get to the next step, that's just nonsense. John 1 is one of the most powerful texts about evangelism that exists. John chapter 1, because both Philip and Andrew did the same thing. They went to someone they knew and they said, dude, you gotta come and see. You gotta come and see. I met somebody, he changed my life. You have to come and see him. They realized, and this is something that I think we need to realize, because we put so much pressure on ourselves to perform, we forget the lesson of the sower is to just scatter the seed. It's not our responsibility how they respond. It's our responsibility to do what needs to be done.
We are not soil examiners, we're seed spreaders.
And so, and to that point, what Andrew and Philip both did is they said, you have to come and meet this person. And then they got out of the way and they let Jesus do the rest of the work. That's the biggest lesson, and to this fear point, and to the discomfort, and to the thinking it has to be some big, that's the most important lesson we can learn. Jesus is going to do the work for us. All we need to do is make the introduction, but also to the point of credibility that the sister raised earlier, we have to have that credibility in our lives, ethically, morally, ourselves. When people see us, they need to see him living through us, or else that message will never be heard and people will never come and see, because we don't have the authentic credentials.
Yeah. Yes, sir. And then Peter, and then we're going to move on for the sake of time.
People just don't care. Why do it? They don't care. We don't want to hear this.
Are you saying that is a fear, or are you saying that's a reality?
That's a reality.
Okay.
We're doing a thing in apathy this year.
Yeah.
And people just don't care. They don't want to hear it. They don't.
Do you mind if I push back just a little bit on that? All right? Are you okay with me pushing back a little bit? Yeah, there are people that don't care and don't want to hear it. But do people not care and don't want to hear it? It's a different question. Do I think that there are individuals that are hostile to the gospel? Or do I think every person that is not a Christian has no interest and will not listen and is hostile towards the gospel? Those are different questions. And that speaks to my attitude. Not your attitude. I'm not making any accusations. There's a young man in our congregation, 20 years old, baptized about 2 years ago. Nobody else in his family. He has a faithful grandma. And grandma is why eventually he became a Christian. This guy is on fire for the Lord. He is on fire for the Lord. And one of the things that he is able to do is get college-age kids to come to a Bible study. Hey, I'm going to do a Bible study. You're going to come. Oh, okay. Young people don't care about the Lord. This guy is proving me wrong every weekend. He is proving me wrong that young people are not interested in hearing about the gospel. They're interested in hearing about the gospel. Now, where it goes from that, I don't know. But they are interested in hearing about the gospel. So that's why I want to go back and say again, you know somebody that would say yes if you asked them. Apathy is a huge problem. Apathy is a huge problem. And there are people that are genuinely hostile towards the gospel and Jesus Christ. But I tend to think that those are the people that get the most press. Peter, what were you going to say?
I think maybe to change that around a little bit, the apathy on our side of the coin. We imagine that the church hired a preacher and that's his job to go do it, not ours. Or we know that brother and sister X over here who brings people, so I'll just go be nice to that person they brought it out and come fly my work for evangelism, rather than taking it personally, wanting to be part of the solution, rather than just not caring.
Yeah. All right. For the sake of time, I've got to move on. This, as I said, this is the first step of a larger conversation. And apparently, this is something we've got some ideas about, we've got some passions about, and that's awesome. And so the whole goal of this weekend is to get that passion out of this building. I hope that we can do that. But, so fear. Your brother mentioned fear. And there are so many subsets of that. Fear of rejection, right? I'm scared I don't know enough. Yeah? I don't know enough about the Bible to make somebody a Christian. Let me ask you, do you know why you became a Christian? Then you know enough to talk to somebody else about why they should be a Christian. I say this to a lot of young people, right? Do you think you have got to know every single thing in and out about the Bible before you get baptized? Does that even make sense? Right? Steve's 180 years old. And I feel confident in saying that Steve would tell me that he doesn't know everything about the Bible. And that he's still studying because it is something that's important to him. If you think you've got to know everything about the Bible before you become baptized, that's just silly. And I would say that to think that you need to know everything about the Bible inside and out, and you can write your own commentary on Revelation before you can sit down with somebody and talk to Jesus about it, is equally foolish. We talked about fools last night. Fools are bad guys. It's foolish. A real one is there might be some relational consequences. And that's a big fear. Not all of my family and loved ones are Christians. And it can get really uncomfortable. And so there's relational consequential fear. There's social ridicule. Man, it's a fear. I don't care how old you get. Nobody likes being left out, made fun of. Peer pressure kind of never goes away. Sorry, peer pressure never goes away. And social ridicule is kind of a real thing. But somebody else said, what's the problem? What's the problem with leaving it up to the evangelist to do it all? Yes, sir.
One, we don't edify ourselves.
We don't what?
We don't learn anything ourselves.
I'm not getting any better.
And I think if you sum it up, sometimes we're lazy. We're just going to be bad. I know sometimes I fall into that category that I'm just lazy. And it's something that each one of us has to work out on our own. But you still need to remember that why are we put on this earth for?
Absolutely. But I want to know, what's the problem with relying on Steve to come evangelize to your friend?
Steve doesn't have the credentials that you have.
He doesn't know your friend as well as you do. He hasn't spent years building a relationship off of common interests and shared stories and things that you love. He's as knowledgeable as he might be. He doesn't have the social credibility and the input that you have with that friend. And honestly, like I said, who probably hangs out with more lost people on a daily basis, you or your preacher? When you go to your office tomorrow morning and he goes to his office tomorrow morning, who's going to be surrounded by more lost people? You've got way more connections to lost people than your preacher does.
But Steve will still come.
He'll still come. He will absolutely still come. But just leaving it all up to him. And maybe there's some frustration. Maybe there's some frustration about past mistakes. I tried and I failed. Man, you know how many times Jesus was rejected? A lot of people have been rejected. All right, so I want to end, well, with the time we have left, probably won't be the happy note. What happens if we continue to neglect this? 2 minutes. What happens if we continue to neglect this?
Church will die.
The church will
Generation.
die. It will die. And we see churches shrinking all over the place. We see young people leaving in droves from every religion. And there's a lot of different reasons why that's happening, right? That's being examined on all different levels. If we are not reaching out to the lost, the church, God's church will not die. All right? God's church will not die. There will always be a remnant of the faithful. That is something that is common throughout Scripture. But there are individual churches. And there are parts of the kingdom that will shrivel and die. Yes, sir.
Of all the 7 churches that Jesus spoke to in Revelation, with all the problems that they had, the only one whose lampstand he threatened to remove from his presence was the church in Ephesus, who was doing all the right things, but didn't have the love that they ought to. And if you look at the letter to the Ephesians in chapter 1, that love that they lost, the implication is their love for the lost.
Yeah. And that's what I want to end on. All right? That's what I want to end on. Bad stuff's happening. You all agree? If we don't evangelize, bad stuff is happening. I know they're going to come on up. Let them come on up. I'm going to keep talking for just a few minutes. I hope you'll be okay with that. But it's about love. I can guilt you into evangelism. I can guilt you into thinking, oh man, we really got to get out there. And it might actually work for a little while. But is guilt towards evangelism a sustainable method? No. Because what's the real issue? Love for the lost. Love for the lost. My heart is the real issue. I can guilt you into doing something. That's not a sustainable method of maintaining evangelism. Is that going to happen overnight? It takes years to build a culture of evangelism. And if there's a church where the evangelistic culture has disappeared, it's going to take some time to build it back. Now, we used to have that. We used to be great. Let's just flip that switch again. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. A new culture has replaced the old one, and it's going to take some time to replace that culture with an evangelistic one. So, we know this is an important job. We've talked about why it's important. We've agreed that it's kind of being neglected for all kinds of reasons, and it's everybody's responsibility. And we know what is going to happen if we don't. So, as I said, this is a real conversation for everybody to examine our hearts. I'm stomping on my own toes when I say this. But we are how more disciples are made. And if we don't do it,